There is a moment in every chosen one's life when silence turns into power. The world thinks you're breaking down, but what they don't realize is you're breaking free. You may not have recognized it at first. It didn't arrive with applause. It didn't come with validation. It came quietly. It came in the form of distance, confusion, and moments where you questioned everything about yourself. From the outside, it looked like you were shrinking. It looked like you were losing momentum. Some people may have even assumed you were falling apart, but they were looking at it from the wrong perspective. You felt misunderstood. You've tried to explain your intentions, your vision, your depth, only to be met with blank stares or subtle resistance. It's as if you were speaking a language no one around you fully understood, and after a while, you stopped trying. Not because you had nothing to say, but because you realized not everyone is meant to understand you in this season. You felt restricted. Opportunities didn't move the way you expected. Doors closed without explanation. Situations that once felt promising suddenly became heavy. You may have wondered why your path seemed more complicated than others, why the pressure felt constant, why the weight never fully lifted. What you didn't see was that restriction wasn't there to confine you, it was there to strengthen you. Pressure has a purpose. It builds internal capacity. It forces depth. It forges clarity. You've pulled back in silence. You became quieter, more observant, less reactive. While others were chasing noise, you were learning to listen. While others were proving themselves, you were studying yourself. That silence was not emptiness. It was construction. It was alignment. It was refinement happening beneath the surface where no one could interfere with it. And here's the truth that changes everything. That wasn't weakness. That was preparation. Preparation doesn't always look powerful. It often looks like isolation. It often feels like delay. It can resemble loss before it reveals purpose. But the chosen one is never being broken without reason. When you are set apart, the process feels different. You are not being reduced. You are being refined. You are not being buried. You are being planted. There comes a point when something shifts internally. You stop needing constant reassurance. You stop over-explaining your boundaries. You stop shrinking to make others comfortable. The approval you once sought begins to lose its grip on you. And in that moment, something awakens. Not loudly, not dramatically, but decisively. Today, we're talking about the exact moment a chosen one breaks free, and why nothing stays the same after that. Because breaking free is not a dramatic exit. It is an internal decision. It is the moment you realize that your silence has turned into strength, your pressure has turned into resilience, and your isolation has turned into clarity. It is the instant you understand that everything that tried to confine you was actually preparing you to operate on a higher level. If this message resonates with you, make sure to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel for more messages meant for the chosen ones. Every breakthrough is preceded by pressure. That is not coincidence, that is design. Before a chosen one breaks free, life begins to tighten. Situations grow heavier, conversations feel strained, opportunities seem delayed. It can feel like the walls are closing in, like momentum has stalled, like something is working against you. But what feels like opposition is often construction happening beneath the surface. Pressure is not random in the life of someone set apart. It is strategic. The first form of pressure is isolation. Not always physical isolation, but energetic isolation. You can be surrounded by people and still feel alone. You can be in rooms full of conversation and feel like your thoughts exist on a different frequency. This isolation is confusing at first. You begin to question yourself. You wonder if you are overthinking. You wonder if you are too sensitive, too deep, too intense. But isolation has a function. When you are constantly affirmed by your environment, you rarely develop internal validation. When you are always understood, you rarely learn how to understand yourself. Isolation forces self-confrontation. It pushes you inward. It removes distractions so you can hear your own discernment more clearly. For a chosen one, isolation is rarely abandonment. It is alignment. Then come the repeated challenges. Patterns that feel familiar, obstacles that seem to reappear just when you think you've overcome them. You solve one issue and another rises. You heal one layer and a deeper layer surfaces. It can feel exhausting. It can feel unfair. You may even ask why the lesson keeps repeating. What you may not realize is that repetition builds mastery. The same way physical resistance builds muscle, spiritual and psychological resistance builds endurance. Each challenge sharpens a different aspect of you. One challenge strengthens your boundaries, another strengthens your patience, another strengthens your discernment. You are not being attacked by repetition. You are being trained through it. Chosen ones are rarely developed in comfort. Comfort produces dependence. Pressure produces capability. And then there is the feeling of being unseen or misunderstood. This one cuts deeply. It is one thing to face external obstacles. It is another to feel like the people around you do not truly see who you are becoming. They may only reference who you used to be. They may interpret your silence as weakness. They may interpret your distance as arrogance. They may interpret your growth as rebellion. When you are evolving, you often outgrow the lens through which people once viewed you. Being unseen forces you to detach from the need for recognition. When no one applauds your growth, you learn to grow anyway. When no one validates your evolution, you learn to trust it without confirmation. That internal shift is critical, because once your strength no longer depends on external acknowledgement, you become unshakable. Resistance before elevation is a pattern that repeats throughout history, throughout psychology, throughout every transformation story ever told. The moment before expansion often feels like contraction. The moment before clarity often feels like confusion. The moment before freedom often feels like restriction. Why? Because expansion requires capacity. If you were elevated without pressure, you would collapse under the weight of what you prayed for. If you were given influence without endurance, criticism would break you. If you were handed opportunity without discernment, you would misuse it. Pressure expands your capacity so that when elevation comes, you are stable enough to sustain it. This is why the chosen one's path feels heavier. You are not being prepared for ordinary responsibility. You are being prepared for impact, and impact demands depth. Pressure also exposes weakness in a way comfort never can. When everything is easy, hidden insecurities remain hidden. When everything flows, blind spots stay concealed. But when pressure increases, cracks appear. Emotional triggers surface. Fear becomes visible. Doubt becomes loud. It can feel like you are regressing. In reality, you are being revealed to yourself. Awareness sharpens in pressure. You begin to see patterns in your reactions. You notice how you respond to betrayal. You observe how you handle rejection. You become conscious of your coping mechanisms. That awareness is power. Without pressure, you might never look closely enough to confront what needs refining. Struggle sharpens perception. When you have experienced misunderstanding, you learn to read people more carefully. When you have experienced manipulation, you develop discernment. When you have experienced isolation, you learn to value alignment over approval. The pressure is not only strengthening you, it is educating you. There is also a psychological recalibration that happens under sustained pressure. At first, you resist it. You try to escape it. You search for ways to reduce it. But eventually, something changes. You adapt. What once overwhelmed you now feels manageable. What once intimidated you now feels familiar. Your nervous system adjusts. Your mind becomes more strategic. Your emotions become less reactive. You do not even notice the growth while it is happening. Then one day, you look back at a situation that once broke you and realize it no longer has the same power. That is not coincidence. That is conditioning. Pressure conditioned you for resilience. For the chosen one, this conditioning is essential, because the moment of breaking free requires internal stability. Freedom without stability turns into chaos. Freedom with stability turns into leadership. The isolation taught you self-trust. The repeated challenges built endurance. The feeling of being unseen dissolved your dependence on validation. Each layer of pressure stripped something away. It stripped insecurity. It stripped impulsiveness. It stripped the need to be understood by everyone. And what remains is clarity. Pressure simplifies your focus. When life tightens, distractions fall away. You stop entertaining what drains you. You stop chasing what confuses you. You start prioritizing what strengthens you. The narrowing effect of pressure refines direction. Most people interpret pressure as a signal to retreat, but for the chosen one, pressure is often the signal that expansion is near. Think about it. A seed experiences pressure before it breaks through the soil. Muscles experience pressure before they grow. Diamonds are formed under pressure. The pattern is consistent across nature, psychology, and spiritual transformation. Compression precedes expansion. When you feel the intensity increasing, it does not automatically mean you are failing. It may mean you are nearing breakthrough. But here is the critical shift. Pressure only prepares you if you respond to it with awareness. If you internalize it as punishment, you shrink. If you interpret it as preparation, you grow. This is where identity matters. If you see yourself as a victim of circumstances, pressure feels cruel. If you see yourself as someone being refined for purpose, pressure feels purposeful. The external situation may be identical. The interpretation changes everything. Chosen ones often sense, even faintly, that their challenges are not random. There is an underlying intuition that something is being built. That intuition keeps you moving when logic cannot explain the process. You begin to understand that not everyone is meant to endure what you endure. Not everyone is built for the level you are being prepared for. And instead of asking why the path feels harder, you begin asking what it is building inside you. This question transforms pressure from enemy to instructor. And as you withstand it, something subtle happens. Your tolerance for chaos decreases. Your need for clarity increases. Your standards elevate. You become less impressed by surface-level connections and more committed to depth. Pressure clarifies your values. The breaking point does not happen randomly. It happens when the internal strength built under pressure surpasses the external forces trying to contain you. At that point, the same pressure that once felt suffocating becomes fuel. You stop reacting to it. You start using it. That is when the shift begins. But before that shift, there is always pressure. Not to destroy you, not to humiliate you, not to reduce you, to prepare you. Pressure isn't punishment, it's preparation. There comes a defining shift in the life of a chosen one that does not look dramatic from the outside. There is no announcement, no public declaration, no visible explosion. It is quiet, internal, almost invisible to everyone else. But inside, something irreversible happens. It is the moment you realize you do not need permission anymore. Permission to grow, permission to change, permission to speak, permission to outgrow, permission to leave environments that no longer align, permission to exist fully as who you are becoming. For a long time, you may not even realize you have been waiting for permission. It shows up subtly. You soften your opinions so others feel comfortable. You shrink your vision so it sounds realistic. You adjust your personality depending on who is in the room. You over-explain your boundaries so no one misinterprets your distance. You justify your decisions in hopes that people will understand your evolution. That pattern begins to exhaust you. You notice how much energy it takes to constantly clarify yourself. You replay conversations in your mind. You craft explanations before you even act. You anticipate objections before you even move forward. You try to manage perceptions instead of living in conviction. Then something shifts. You stop over-explaining yourself. You begin to understand that clarity does not require constant justification. Not everyone will understand your growth. Not everyone will agree with your boundaries. Not everyone will see what you see. And for the first time, that realization no longer terrifies you. You speak simply. You move decisively. You let your actions communicate what your explanations once tried to control. The need to be thoroughly understood by everyone fades. You accept that alignment matters more than agreement. This is not arrogance, it is maturity. Then comes the deeper release. You stop seeking validation. Validation is subtle currency. It feels good. It feels safe. It feels reassuring. When people affirm you, it reduces doubt. When they support your choices, it strengthens your confidence. But when your stability depends on their approval, You are unconsciously giving them authority over your direction. A chosen one eventually grows tired of outsourcing self-worth. You begin noticing how often you look for signals from others before trusting your instincts. You notice how praise energizes you and criticism destabilizes you. You realize that if validation can elevate you that quickly, rejection can dismantle you just as fast. So you recalibrate. You start asking yourself different questions. Instead of asking whether they approve, you ask whether you are aligned. Instead of asking whether they understand, you ask whether you are being truthful. Instead of measuring your value through applause, you measure it through integrity. Validation loses its grip when self-trust strengthens. And then comes the boldest shift of all. You choose truth over comfort. Comfort is seductive. It keeps relationships intact. It keeps environments predictable. It keeps you accepted. But comfort often demands compromise. It asks you to silence parts of yourself. It asks you to delay decisions. It asks you to remain small, so dynamics stay undisturbed. Truth disrupts comfort. Truth may create tension. Truth may create distance. Truth may expose incompatibility. But truth also creates freedom. When you choose truth, you stop negotiating with your own intuition. You stop pretending that misalignment is manageable. You stop convincing yourself that staying silent is peace. Peace built on suppression is not peace, it is postponement. The realization moment intensifies when your emotional reactions begin to change. Situations that once triggered you no longer pull you in the same way. Criticism that once provoked defensiveness now meets calm observation. Rejection that once spiraled into self-doubt now meets quiet acceptance. You no longer react emotionally. This does not mean you do not feel. It means you no longer feel the need to prove through reaction. Emotional reactivity is often rooted in insecurity. When you are unsure of your worth, every disagreement feels like an attack. When you are unstable in identity, every dismissal feels like confirmation of inadequacy. But when self-awareness deepens, your nervous system settles. You respond instead of react. You observe instead of absorb. You recognize that not every opinion deserves your emotional energy. This emotional steadiness is a turning point, because once you are no longer easily shaken, control over you diminishes. Another layer falls away. You stop trying to prove your worth. Proving is exhausting. It requires constant performance. It turns life into a stage. You measure every achievement against someone else's expectations. You push yourself not because you are inspired, but because you want recognition. You chase milestones not because they align with your purpose, but because they silence doubt temporarily. Eventually, you realize that proving never ends. There is always another standard, another critic, another comparison. So you step off the stage. You begin doing things because they align, not because they impress. You pursue growth because it fulfills you, not because it silences others. You stop arguing your value and start embodying it. The energy once spent convincing others becomes available for creation. And then perhaps the most liberating shift of all emerges. You are no longer afraid of being left behind. Fear of abandonment keeps many people compliant. It keeps them in environments that suffocate growth. It keeps them tied to relationships that no longer resonate. It keeps them silent when they should speak. It keeps them small when they are meant to expand. But when the realization moment crystallizes, something profound happens. You understand that being left behind is sometimes necessary for elevation. You understand that separation is not always loss. You understand that outgrowing a space does not mean you've failed there. You begin to trust that what is aligned will remain, and what is misaligned will naturally fall away. The fear that once dictated your decisions dissolves. You no longer cling to people who misunderstand you. You no longer tolerate dynamics that require you to shrink. You no longer remain in rooms where your authenticity feels like a threat. This is the internal break. Not loud, not explosive, but absolute. You stop asking to belong. Belonging once meant fitting in. It meant adjusting your edges. It meant seeking acceptance. But now, belonging means alignment. It means resonance. It means being fully yourself without distortion. And here is the paradox. The moment you stop asking to belong, you begin to lead. Leadership does not begin with authority, it begins with self-possession. When you are no longer trying to fit into every room, you naturally stand out in the right ones. When you stop chasing acceptance, you become magnetic to those who recognize authenticity. When you stop bending for comfort, your presence gains weight. The realization moment shifts your posture internally. You stand differently, you speak differently, you decide differently. You do not feel the need to announce your evolution. It is evident. You become less accessible to chaos, less influenced by gossip, less distracted by comparison. Your focus sharpens because your identity stabilizes. Decisions that once required weeks of overthinking now require moments of clarity, and the world responds. Not immediately in applause, but in energy. Dynamics shift, conversations change. Some people drift away, others draw closer. Opportunities align differently. You are no longer operating from fear of exclusion. You are operating from certainty of self. The realization moment is not about rebellion, it is about recognition. Recognition that you were never meant to ask for permission to be who you are becoming. Recognition that approval was never the prerequisite for purpose. Recognition that freedom begins the moment you stop negotiating with your own truth. The moment you stop asking to belong, you begin to lead. Everything changes internally before it changes externally. Most people expect transformation to be visible first. They look for dramatic announcements, obvious breakthroughs, sudden success. But the chosen one understands something deeper. The real shift happens within, long before the world reflects it back. After the realization moment, when you no longer seek permission, no longer chase validation, no longer react from insecurity, something subtle begins to rearrange inside you. Your thoughts feel clearer, your decisions feel cleaner, your emotions feel steadier. The chaos that once felt constant begins to lose its volume. You may not even recognize it immediately, but your energy has shifted. Energy is not mystical in this context. It is psychological alignment. It is emotional regulation. It is clarity of identity. When those internal systems stabilize, your external interactions cannot remain the same. The first noticeable sign is this: the people who doubted you start noticing you. Not because you demanded their attention, not because you tried to impress them, but because your presence feels different. There is less neediness in your tone, less defensiveness in your posture, less urgency in your explanations. You are no longer trying to convince anyone of who you are. And confidence that does not beg for recognition commands it naturally. Some of the same people who once overlooked you may begin asking questions. They may comment on how you seem calmer, more focused, more distant perhaps. They might interpret your detachment as change, but what they are actually sensing is stability. When you stop chasing approval, you stop leaking energy. Before the shift, doubt was detectable. Even if you tried to hide it, it was there in subtle ways. In how you hesitated, in how you over-explained, in how you reacted to criticism. Once that doubt dissolves, your presence becomes grounded. You no longer feel like you are trying to earn space in the room, you simply occupy it. This is when the external reflection begins. The second sign is that new opportunities begin to surface. This is not random, it is not luck, it is alignment responding to clarity. When your identity sharpens, your decisions sharpen. You say no more confidently, you walk away more quickly from misalignment. You choose environments more intentionally. That selectiveness filters your reality. Before the shift, you may have tolerated opportunities that did not fully resonate. You may have accepted offers out of fear of missing out. You may have stayed connected to spaces that drained you because you were afraid of losing access. After the shift, you become discerning, and discernment acts like a gatekeeper. When you stop entertaining what is not aligned, you create room for what is. Opportunities that match your frequency begin to find you because you are no longer entangled in distractions. Conversations open that feel expansive instead of heavy. Collaborations emerge that feel natural instead of forced. It may appear to others as sudden progress, but it is the cumulative effect of internal restructuring. Then something even more noticeable happens. Drama fades, alignment replaces it. Before the shift, you may have found yourself constantly managing tension, misunderstandings, power struggles, emotional turbulence. It may have felt like no matter how much you tried to stay centered, chaos kept orbiting you. But drama requires participation. When you operated from fear, from insecurity, from the need to prove yourself, you unconsciously engaged with dynamics that fed those emotions. You defended yourself, you explained yourself, you reacted, you tried to fix perceptions. That engagement kept you entangled. When fear loses its control over you, your participation changes. You stop arguing with people committed to misunderstanding you. You stop responding to subtle provocations. You stop entertaining conversations that revolve around comparison or gossip. Your silence becomes selective rather than suppressed. And without your energy fueling it, drama loses momentum. This is not because the world has become calmer. It is because you are no longer available for chaos in the same way. Alignment replaces it. Conversations become more purposeful. Interactions become more direct. Relationships become fewer but deeper. The internal shift rewrites your relational patterns. Here is the deeper energetic explanation. When you stop operating from fear, your frequency changes. Fear creates contraction. It narrows perspective. It amplifies insecurity. It pushes you to seek control or validation. Decisions made from fear often carry urgency, defensiveness, or attachment. That energy is perceptible. People sense it, even if they cannot articulate it. When you move from fear to self-trust, contraction turns into expansion. You no longer rush to prove. You no longer cling to outcomes. You no longer chase what does not reciprocate. Your choices come from clarity instead of panic. That internal spaciousness alters how you communicate, how you negotiate, how you respond to uncertainty. Your frequency changes because your internal posture changes, and freedom creates magnetism. Magnetism is not about performance, it is about coherence. When your thoughts, words, and actions align, you become predictable in your integrity. Others begin to trust your steadiness. Opportunities gravitate toward reliability. Influence grows where authenticity is consistent. You are no longer scattered across multiple identities depending on who you are around. You are integrated. That integration is powerful. People often confuse magnetism with charisma, but true magnetism is groundedness. It is the quiet confidence of someone who is not trying to extract approval from every interaction. It is the composure of someone who knows they can walk away without collapsing. When you are no longer afraid to lose, you become difficult to manipulate. This is when dynamics shift most noticeably. Those who once underestimated you begin recalibrating their perception, not because you demanded recognition, but because your energy no longer invites dismissal. Your boundaries are clearer, your tone is steadier, your decisions are cleaner. You become less explainable and more evident, and here is where the transformation completes its arc. They didn't lose you, they lost access to the old version of you, the version that over-explained, the version that tolerated misalignment, the version that reacted emotionally to every slight, the version that feared being left behind. That version is no longer available. This does not mean you became cold. It means you became defined. Access changes when identity stabilizes. Some people were comfortable with you when you were uncertain. When you doubted yourself, they felt secure. When you sought validation, they held leverage. When you reacted emotionally, they could predict and control the narrative. But when you break free internally, that leverage disappears. You are no longer negotiating from insecurity. You are no longer compromising truth for comfort. You are no longer shrinking to preserve connection. That shift can feel threatening to those who benefited from your previous uncertainty. So some will drift, others will adjust, a few will rise with you. This is the natural consequence of energy shifting. Externally, it may look like distancing, like new beginnings, like unexpected progress. But internally, it feels like peace. Not the fragile peace that depends on everything going right. A steady peace rooted in self-possession. The chosen one does not announce this shift. It is felt. You walk into rooms differently. You speak with less urgency. You make decisions with less hesitation. You no longer need to prove that you are evolving. Your consistency communicates it. Everything changes internally before it changes externally. By the time the world recognizes your breakthrough, you have already lived in it privately. By the time others acknowledge your growth, you have already detached from needing their acknowledgement. This is the moment the energy stabilizes. You are not chasing, you are not forcing, you are not reacting, you are aligned. And when alignment replaces fear, when magnetism replaces insecurity, when clarity replaces chaos, the shift becomes irreversible. They didn't lose you. They lost access to the old version of you. By now, you understand something most people never fully grasp. The breaking point is not the end, it is the threshold. What felt like isolation was not abandonment. What felt like restriction was not rejection. What felt like pressure was not punishment. It was refinement. The identity of a chosen one is not built in comfort. It is carved in resistance. It is strengthened in silence. It is clarified in moments where no one claps, no one validates, and no one fully understands what you are becoming. And yet, you continue. If you feel pressure, you are not being crushed. You are being refined. Pressure reveals what is weak so it can be strengthened. It removes what is unstable so it can be rebuilt. It forces you to develop endurance, discernment, and emotional discipline. The intensity you feel is not evidence that you are failing. It is evidence that you are expanding. If you are losing people, you are not being abandoned. You are outgrowing them. Growth changes compatibility. Evolution shifts dynamics. Not everyone is meant to walk into the next version of your life. Some were assignments for a season. Some were lessons in disguise. Some were mirrors reflecting parts of you that needed healing. When alignment changes, separation is natural. It does not mean you are wrong. It means you are rising. If you are quiet, you are not invisible. You may be gathering strength. Silence is often mistaken for weakness by those who only understand noise. But silence is where strategy forms. Silence is where clarity sharpens. Silence is where emotional control matures. While others are reacting, you are recalibrating. While others are performing, you are preparing. There is power in restraint. There is authority in stillness. Breaking free is rarely dramatic. It does not always come with confrontation or announcement. It begins with an internal decision, a shift in self-perception, a release of fear, a refusal to keep shrinking. It begins when you stop negotiating with your own truth. It solidifies when you realize you no longer need permission to become who you were always meant to be. Breaking free isn't loud, it's internal. And when it happens, the world feels it. They feel it in your steadiness. They feel it in your boundaries. They feel it in your absence from chaos. They feel it in your clarity. You do not have to declare your transformation. Your presence communicates it. The way you move communicates it. The way you no longer react communicates it. The way you no longer chase communicates it. The chosen one does not beg to belong. The chosen one leads by alignment. And once you reach that point, there is no returning to who you were before awareness. So if you recognize yourself in this message, understand this clearly. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not lost. You are in process. And process precedes power. If this message spoke to you, like this video, share it with another chosen one, and subscribe so you never miss the messages meant for you.